you're engaged, and then you're like, okay,
what now?
Now what? It's like you have to start planning. Where do you begin? So this is what we're getting into. Hey besties, let's talk about wedding planning, while we get ready, and what's easy, what's difficult, all you need to know, what I've learned so far. Still haven't had the wedding, still planning. All the websites you can use, all the apps, everything. So first things first, I think the most important thing to begin with is money. The budget. Like, you need to first, sit down with your partner and think, how much are you willing to part with? Just need to figure out like how much do you want to spend on this day, because I feel like a lot of the times people sometimes have weddings and then it's like you're eating breadcrumbs for months because you had this really lavish wedding or something that you couldn't afford. So I think it's very important to just set a budget and know, okay, this is what we're willing to spend, and not think about it like months, like not think about the amount that we spent like years later, like, oh my god, if we hadn't spent so much on X, Y, and Z, this. So I think just like sitting down and setting a budget, and also looking at your budget and being realistic about your budget. Maybe you can, calculate your salaries, and you want to spend X amount of your salaries and set that money aside for your weddings. I've written down a list of things to consider when setting up a budget. So there's the venue cost. This includes like the deposit and the rental fees for the wedding. There's also the catering. I feel like a lot of the money or a lot of the budget goes towards catering and drinks. And this includes the cake and the dessert and water and soft drinks. A tip which I learned from speaking to a venue is that there's some places that have distributors, so especially for water and soft drinks, you can have a distributor that brings in the soft drinks and the water, and then whatever is consumed, that's what they're going to charge you for, and then whatever hasn't been consumed, they then come after the wedding and they take back all the stuff that hasn't been opened. And I'm like, oh my god, that's perfect, that's great. That way you only end up spending for what you consume. That sounds great. That sounds really good. The wedding attire, how much are you willing to spend for your clothes, and also how much is it going to be for like alterations for your dress, for your partner's outfit? If you are going to be paying for your bridesmaids and groomsmen, what will that cost look like, or if they'll be paying for themselves? And then there's also videography and photography. What are you willing to pay? And then also, if you have a destination wedding, are you going to cover the costs for the photographer and the videographer, or are they going to do that by themselves? Just what it includes. And then there's also flowers and decor, what kind of flowers you want to get. I think always also just look at what flowers are available in the season or in the time that you want to get married, just so that you're not disappointed and you're not shipping in flowers from somewhere else and it just becomes like very expensive. Then there's also music and entertainment. Do you want to have a DJ? You have a DJ, but do you want to have a band? How many people will play in the band? Do you want to have someone playing the violin or the harp? Like, what is that going to cost? And also time-wise. So having a budget, I think, is the most important thing. It gives you the headstone for where to begin and where to end. Okay, something else to consider is stationery. Are you going to have invites and save the dates and programs? Like, that's all included on the stationery. Then you also need to consider transportation. If, for example, you're having the wedding at a different location, some people like to use cars or horses, so you need to consider that in your budget. Or if it's a destination wedding, if people are going to fly in, also, how are they going to get from the airport, and if people have to come, if you're having it at a hotel, because not everyone will stay at the hotel, how you ferry people to and fro. So you need to think about the transport and what you're willing to pay for that. Something else which I didn't know is paying for a marriage license. So you have to pay for a marriage license. So you need to, consider that in your budget, because it's like, oh, having a wedding, and then it's like, oh, you don't have the actual marriage license. And then if you have to have someone officiate the wedding, you need to consider that in the cost. You need to be able to pay for the officiant. And then favors and gifts. What are you going to give people for favors and gifts for your wedding? Is it, I don't know, people like to give different, whenever I received the weddings before, I think booklets or notebooks, and just whatever gifts you want to give people, candles, all of those things, essential oils. It's just have to consider how much are you willing to spend on gifts for the wedding. Something else is the beauty and treatment. So like, the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, what beauty treatments are they going to get before the wedding? Your parents as well. That's something to consider. And how much is it going to cost? Your hair and makeup. What's the price what are you willing to spend? And then also you have to also set aside some money for miscellaneous. Like these could just be extra things, maybe like tips, taxes, or sometimes even unexpected costs which you probably maybe haven't planned for. Something else to consider when you're doing your budget is also your wedding planner. How much are you willing to pay for a wedding planner? So that's something to think about. And also, if you don't want to have a wedding planner, maybe you can also just have a wedding coordinator instead, because I think that's very important, so that on the day, somebody that can make sure everybody's there on time, all the vendors are there, everything is taken care of, and so that you're not sitting at your wedding and or before the wedding and you're trying to call where's the caterer, where's the photographer, all of these things. So at least if you don't want to get a wedding planner and you want to do it by yourself, I think a wedding coordinator for that day is super important. And this is just if you have like a bigger wedding, but I think if you have like a smaller wedding, maybe 30 people, 40 people or so, I think maybe it's a little bit more manageable. But I think when it comes to like bigger numbers, then it is when it becomes quite tricky. And I think a wedding above 50 people or 40 people is a big wedding, in my opinion. That's just my opinion. But yes, after you've already thought about your budget and what you're willing to spend, I think you can now start to envision your wedding. I think you can start to think, what is it you want to have at your wedding? What is important for you at your wedding? What is it that you don't want to have at your wedding? So just envision it. Do you want a beach wedding? Do you want like a countryside wedding? Do you want a church wedding, a garden wedding? Like, what do you want? What do you want your wedding to look like?
What do you want?
And I feel like perhaps from the moment you said yes, or from the moment you proposed, you already had it in your mind what you want your wedding to look like. But also, I feel like a lot of the times it happens that my rings are stuck. Eesh. Oh my god, my rings are literally stuck. So I feel like a lot of the times what happens is that people get engaged, you're super excited, you're like, okay, you're engaged, and then you're like, okay, now what? It's like you have to start planning. Where do you begin? So this is what we're getting into. After you've already envisioned what kind of wedding you want to have, I think then from there, because you're thinking, okay, do you want a church wedding? Do you want like just whatever you want it to look like, countryside, whatever that's gonna be, then you have to think about the venue. I think even before you set the date, I think having the venue is super important, because then you could have set the date, but then the venue, you haven't gotten the venue that you want, and then it's like, what happens next? Do you change the date? It's like, no. So I think setting up a venue is super important. So finding the right venue, I think, is important. And things to consider when trying to find a venue. We, for example, wanted to have a venue whereby we can play music until whatever time. So we had to look for places that were okay with music, that we don't have any trouble playing music, and so we're not disturbing anybody else. So we had to try and find somewhere that was remote. So finding somewhere, a place that is, that has like a vision of what exactly you're looking for your wedding, I think that's super important. And also if you want like a church wedding, like where do you want the church to be? How big? How many people do you want to come to this wedding? When you're thinking of the venue, you need to also consider how many people this venue can accommodate, because some places maybe could be too small, or maybe some places could even be too big that you're just paying so much for a venue that you're not going to use entirety of. So just consider like how many people can it take? So not just where it is, and also how easy it is to get to the venue, because sometimes people could have, maybe for destination weddings, some people could have destinations that are super far away, and then not everyone in their family can make it. So you need to consider the venue. How many people do you want? Because I feel like the further away the wedding is, the fewer people will come, because people have their own lives that they're living and their own priorities. So you just consider the venue and how important it is for you to have certain people there. And also when considering the venue, you also need to think about accessibility, like in case there's places that have stairs, is it accessible to everyone? So I think that's something to consider for the wedding. Also, when thinking about the venue, you need to also consider the privacy of different places, because perhaps if you're having it at a hotel, you need to acknowledge the fact that if you don't book out the whole hotel, then there could be other guests staying at the hotel, and how comfortable are you with having strangers there? Because like people like to look. If there's a wedding happening, people will come by, people will pass by, people will look, people might come, they might eat, take your free out, like whatever it is, strangers, people you don't know, if it's at a public place, they will pop by and you know you can't be I don't know, I feel like it's just difficult to try and restrict people. I will make a separate video specifically for looking for venues because I'll be doing a destination wedding, so I'll make a specific video just for that, just so that we can explore different venues in Kenya, picking a roundabout date, like maybe a 2 weeks, maybe 2 weeks, 3 weeks span. And also when considering the date, also think about holidays. Are there going to be any holidays? Because if you do it during the holidays, then people, you know, if it's Easter or Christmas or Eid, like people want to spend that time with their family, so you need to make sure you pick a date that's not family time. Picking a date that is, perhaps if it's in a touristy area, picking a date that's not during peak season, picking a date that is tourist season, and also so you can pick a date where the venue isn't occupied. If you're lucky and you know your parents have like a really big garden or something where you can host a party, well and good, you know, you can, venue is not that much of a problem for you. But then if, I guess most people, not everyone has like a big garden, so you definitely have to consider the venue and when the venue is available. So we actually changed the date of our wedding. I mean, we hadn't announced it to anyone, but then the date that we picked, we changed the date of our wedding because the venue that we wanted wasn't available on that date. Something very important to consider. I think venue before anything else, before you get any other vendors. Okay, so before we move on, I guess after you've already picked up your date, and then is when you need to start sending out your invites. So this includes a stationery. So for me, for example, because I wanted to save money on stationery, I was like, I don't want to have to go following up with a graphic designer and all of that, going back and forth, finding the perfect paper, and then also like emailing or in this mailing stuff to people. I was like, I think it's just so much easier to do it with a website. I think having a website makes it so much easier. These are some websites that have these tools that help you send RSVPs and everything for your wedding, and you can also set up your wedding website. So there's Hitched, and then there's also The Knot, and then there's also Zola, and then there's also With Joy. So I chose to go with Joy because it just had all the specifications that I was looking for. So you can set up, like we even set up a section where you can choose, are you vegetarian, are you non-vegetarian, do you have any allergies, just so that we know when we're planning the meals, how is it, do you have a nut allergy? Like if people have allergies, they need to fill that in, just so we know not to include all of those things in the food. And also if people have any, you know, special requirements, just so we can put all of that, and it just makes it easy for planning. And also I think when people are RSVPing on a website, you just have everybody's names, everybody's details. If there's any changes or anything, it's easy just to, because you have all of that data, it's easy just to email everybody all at once. And if there's any updates, everything is all at once. Pinterest, like Pinterest has so much, like I love Pinterest, and I have boards for everything. Everything has a board, even the photography, like how I want the pictures to look like, I have a board specifically for that. So definitely set up a Pinterest board, you know, find the ideas that you want. I think I'll also share some, you know, some boards of like what the ideas that I've come up with, and you know, you can like look at them and modify them to your liking. Okay, so the other free tool that you can use to help you plan is Google. So if you go on your Google Drive, I want to do this as I screen record. Google Drive, you press new, and then you go to create, and then you choose Google Sheets. From there you can choose from templates. So if you scroll all the way down, there is a section for wedding planner, yes. So you go to wedding planner, and inside the wedding planner there are all of these amazing tools. So it starts with sections, so there's like the to-do, there's coordination, then there's the schedule, like what time do you want your wedding to start, everything. Then there's the budget estimator, and you can definitely change the budget. If you know how to use Google Sheets, you can definitely change the budget to your local currency. Thanks. Okay, so then another thing that you can do is go over to ChatGPT. It can really help you with budgeting as well. So I can ask, what would a wedding of 50 people cost in Nairobi? So you can just go over to ChatGPT, and ChatGPT can also help you like with the budgeting. So it says, for example, venues, mid-range venue is 100,000 to 200,000, high-end venue 250,000 to 500,000. Then catering, it's maybe 1,500 to 3,000 person, or so a total of 50 guests, maybe you'll pay 150. I feel like the 3,000 is a little low, but that's just, you know, that's decorations. Maybe basic 50 to 100,000, elaborate 150 to 300,000. So like ChatGPT really helps you with, I think it just gathers all the information, and it really helps you have like a rough estimate. So flowers, what you're gonna spend, stationery, the wedding cake, all of those things. So then it's estimated that like if you had a mid-range wedding, the price would be perhaps between 385,000 to around 760,000. That's for mid-range. If you had high-end wedding, it would be between 635,000 to about 1.4 million Kenyan shillings. That's just an estimate that ChatGPT has given, and I think it really helps because it just gathers like all the data from the internet. But then you also have to consider that the data that ChatGPT sometimes provides is not up to date unless you're using the paid version. So if you're using the paid version, it's more up to date information. So ChatGPT is your bestie. Google Docs is also your bestie. It has all the information. Like, I'm still just looking at this and just like, wow, everything is here. Yes, so with the budget estimator, you can use ChatGPT to help you just fill in like the rough estimates of the budget for what you think it will cost. And also in this spreadsheet still, there's even another section for a detailed budget. So, you know, the ceremony, the reception, printed materials, gift, favors, all of that. Then there's the guest list, you know, who you're gonna invite, and then you also can put it into different sections of like who's inviting. It's like, okay, so maybe if you're having a wedding for 50 people, then you can both decide, you and your partner can decide, okay, we each get 25 people, who do we bring? And then if also like maybe perhaps one person has a bigger family, then it's like, okay, you can get more people, X, Y, and Z, when setting up your guest list. And then invites, you can also fill out everybody's details, and it can help you know, okay, who have you sent an invite to, who haven't you invited yet, because perhaps maybe you have people from your office and you're like, okay, you know, if all of your family says yes, and then you've already maybe set your guest list to maybe 50 people, it's like if everybody in your family said yes, or everybody invited said yes, people from your office, it's like, ooh, okay, who do you invite, who do you not invite, because that's something to consider. So just having a guest list of who you've already invited is also super important, so that later on, after you've done like the important people to you, then you can invite like the sub people, I don't know what to call it. And then seating charts, it has that as well. Like this sheet has everything. It has gifts, venue, hotel, attire, hair, makeup, flowers, cake, caterer, photographer, videographer, entertainment, music. And the amazing thing about doing it on a spreadsheet is that you can go like list by list on like what's important to you, what's not important to you. Like when we're looking for venues, for example, I made a spreadsheet and we also put down the prices of like, okay, what are these different places charging, how many people can they accommodate, all of that. So that's all very important to consider. So I think just having a spreadsheet makes life like 100 times better. And then also you can, you know, play around with the colors if that makes you feel like you're doing a scrapbook or something. So yeah, I think having a spreadsheet, your bestie spreadsheet. So this spreadsheet is available for everyone for free if you just go on your Google Drive. So a tool that helps quite a bit is, I would say, ChatGPT. Like it's helped me quite a bit, like especially looking for venues. I was like, okay, what are the wedding venues in Kenya? Because the thing about Google is that sometimes because ads, there's like sponsored ads and everything, so then it's like information is like, I don't know, I feel like it's arranged differently. Like now I just use ChatGPT as my search engine, and but then sometimes it's outdated. So I'm like, okay, wedding venues in Kenya that can accommodate X amount of people. Put all of that information and it'll just give you a list of what you need, which I think is great. So yes, that is where I'm at as of now. I'm in the process of getting vendors and also trying to find the wedding dress of what to wear.